This is Health Call Online, the place for extended versions of interviews you hear on our radio broadcast, the Health Call Radio Hour, heard on more and more stations around the country and national syndication. We start our day putting literally dozens and sometimes hundreds of chemicals on our face and skin. Are they safe? Well, we trust that they are, but you may have seen some headlines recently that cause concern, talking about something called PFAS, a class of chemicals sometimes known as the forever chemicals. New concerns about what they may be doing in our body. Plus, we're going to talk about whether or not wrinkle creams and some other cosmetics are actually effective. And for this, we're turning to Dr. Fane Fry. She is not only a dermatologist, she is author of a book called The Skincare Hoax: How We're Being Tricked into Buying Potions, Lotions, and Wrinkle Creams. So these PFAS chemicals, can you give us a brief overview on what they are and why there's concern about them?
Yeah, they're ubiquitous. They're used in many industries. You might know them as Scotchgard or Teflon. It's a pre or polyfluoroalkyl substances that are used also in cosmetics intentionally, and sometimes they're breakdown products of other PFAS, as we call them for short. They add consistency and texture to products, and they're being used less and less, which is good. The concern, of course, is that they are very, very stable. They have what's called a carbon fluoride bond, and they're very difficult, resistant to oil and water and heat. So they last, not forever, but they last for a very long time. Of course, the concern is that they build up in the environment, and then we get exposed to them.
Yeah, so that makes sense. That explains why they'd be helpful in lipstick and mascara and those products. I get that. But I just saw a study that said there is increasing awareness of metabolites of these chemicals in our systems. And so a metabolite is after your body breaks them down, it produces these leftovers. And they're seeing an increase in type 2 diabetes and some other conditions in women using these. So can you tell me more about the efforts to get them off the market, and how would I know if they're in my products?
Well, first, you have to be clear the science is really in its infancy, and there's no really great studies that are associating this buildup with any disease state to date. And also, Lee, another really great concept we have to talk about before you talk about this chemical or any other is the concept of dose and toxicity. That we have a lot of ingredients and medicines that we use on a daily basis that you would argue are unhealthy in high doses. But as any scientist who studies poisons and harsh chemicals knows, there's always a concentration of any chemical where it's harmless. So, of course, we need the studies, and I'm all for great studies, as is everybody. I think I speak for certainly most dermatologists, most scientists. But a great example would be botulism toxin. If you inject 3,000 units, you will die of botulism. Yet there's over 3 million injections of Botox a year. That's botulism toxin.
Sure.
So it's not only harmless, you might even find it beneficial. So we talk about these PFAS. The concern with those is they don't break down. So you worry about the long-term accumulation, again, with this particular ingredient. But before you discuss any harm of any ingredient or compound, you really have to understand the dose versus the toxicity. And that's something most people don't take into consideration.
So I have read that several states, and even there's a bill in Congress right now to get these things completely out of the makeup stream. Is there a way for me to know if what I'm using contains these PFAS chemicals?
Well, the intentional ones that are listed, you'll see them in the back as I think it's called PTOF. There's several of them. But again, most cosmetic companies are removing them voluntarily. We don't know because not every manufacturer is volunteering their information to the FDA. It's now a volunteer process. But of the ones who are volunteering, when this process started in 2019, there were about 500 plus products that had PFAS in them. And I think the most recent number is down to over 200. So companies are voluntarily removing these PFAS chemicals from their products. And I think over time, any reputable company is going to do just that.
So what I'm hearing from you, my takeaway here is it's something maybe we ought to be concerned about, but nothing to freak out over.
I would not freak out over it whatsoever. Right now, I think the studies are worth looking into. I think pulling them back because that you can formulate really great products without them. And I believe really reputable companies are going to do that.
So I want to talk a little bit about an important concept that your book covers, and that is what are really cosmetics as opposed to medications or therapeutic treatments, as particularly as it applies to wrinkle creams. What do I need to know about this?
Well, you need to know that a cosmetic, by definition, is any product that intends to beautify or adorn. The intent is not to change the structure or function of any organ. In this case, we're talking about the skin. So if you're a manufacturer, it is incumbent upon you to sell a safe product. It is your responsibility to do that. Yet the intent of that product cannot be to permanently change the structure or function of any of the skin in this case. It also can't be used intended to prevent, treat, or mitigate a disease. And if it did any of those things, by law, it's a drug. And the reason that's an issue is because as a drug, it gets pre-market approval. It has to prove safety and efficacy before it goes to market, which is not the case with cosmetics. So the overwhelming majority of these anti-wrinkle creams you're inquiring about, these are cosmetics, which by law are not intending to really permanently change the structure or function of the skin.
So these products I see advertised, and they are everywhere,
Yeah,
that talk about smoothing skin and eliminating wrinkles and removing crepiness.
sure.
Um, do they work?
Well, as moisturizers, now a moisturizer is a product that helps the skin increase its water content. I like to use imagery of a raisin. If you take a raisin and you pump water into it, you get a grape. It's
Mhm.
temporary, and we could argue it's anti-wrinkle or it's not. It's a wonderful hydration effect. You certainly can say it decreases the appearance of those fine lines on that raisin. And I believe that those anti-wrinkle creams, I don't care whether there's retinol or niacinamide or whether there's your peptides, coenzyme Q. I can sit here and rattle off a whole bunch of these marketing ingredients. I think they're added to satisfy the claim that it's an anti-wrinkle cream, but how well that product really works, and from my experience, is how well it acts as a moisturizer.
Interesting. So let's just take a minute and step through some of those ingredients and what they claim to do. One of them that I see often referenced is hyaluronic acid. Now, what
Mhm.
is that, and what's the role it's supposed to perform?
So hyaluronic acid is it's a mucopolysaccharide. It's a sugar-based molecule. And the overwhelming majority of your soft tissue in your body is comprised of hyaluronic acid. So it's a natural component of your body. It's a very large molecule, Lee, and so it's not going to penetrate into those 20 top layers, which are very functional but non-living. But as a large molecule, it's not going to get through, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have benefit in formulation. So hyaluronic acid has an amazing ability to hold on to a lot of water. And we call that in cosmetic chemistry, we call that as a chemist who produces or somebody who would produce formulations, a humectant. These are ingredients that retain water. And then we have other ingredients called occlusives that create a film so that the water can't evaporate. Hyaluronic acid has a great ability to hold on to water. So in a moisturizer, it's a very effective humectant, but it's an expensive product to buy hyaluronic acid. And so, in my opinion, it increases the cost of the product versus using something like glycerin, which is a very inexpensive and also a very effective humectant, which, by the way, is also inherent in skin naturally.
Okay, let's walk down that path. That's really interesting. So if I want to find a moisturizer that's going to be effective
Mhm.
and inexpensive, you're suggesting glycerin over hyaluronic acid.
Yes, I am. And if you look at the first really simple rules, the 90 to 95% of any moisturizer, anti-aging cream, anti-wrinkle cream, the first 4 or 5 ingredients will constitute about 95% of that product. Now I can almost guarantee the first product is going to be water, and it's probably going to be 70 to 80% water. The next ingredient is likely going to be a humectant or an occlusive. Glycerin is a good one to look for. That occlusive, that film former, is a great one to look for. Is petroleum jelly, or it might be called petrolatum when it's put in solution as part of a formulation. And everybody knows water and oil don't mix. So the fourth or fifth or sixth ingredient is likely going to be something called an emulsifier, which keeps that water and oil component together. Cetyl alcohol is a very common one that you might see.
Yeah, I have seen that mentioned. So I went through my the bathroom shelf and cabinet, at my house, and pulled off some things I want to just ask you about that my wife uses on a regular basis.
Okay.
So here is one, a face cream. I won't mention the brand name, but it says it contains vitamin C and hyaluronic acid. We just talked about hyaluronic acid.
Mhm.
Obviously, what is vitamin C? What role does it play?
Well, vitamin C is an antioxidant. It's a very unstable ingredient. Unfortunately, it's a charged molecule. It's not going to penetrate. There are some studies that do show when applied on the surface and then exposed to ultraviolet light, especially in the presence of vitamin E, you might protect some of the very surface cells that are not living and functional. But for vitamin C to be really stable, it has to be in a product that's got a very low pH, around 3.5, which is pretty acidic. It's not stable the minute it sees the light and it's on the skin. It's likely breaking down. And I imagine if you look on that ingredient listing, you're going to see whatever the vitamin C component is. It's not going to be one of the first 4 or 5 ingredients. It's probably going to be one of the last ingredients. You might see ascorbic acid, palmitate. Maybe you'll see.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is next to last.
Next
On
to
the
last.
product,
So it's going to
on the
satisfy the
ingredient list.
claim. All right. And look at the first 4 or 5 ingredients on there. What do you see?
Let's see. Water,
There
as
you
you
go. There's your
suggested.
70%.
Carthamus, tinctorius
That's an oil.
safflower seed oil.
Yeah, that's an oil. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's
You're right.
That's your occlusive.
Cetyl alcohol,
Yeah, that's your emulsifier. That's keeping the water and oil together.
glycol-stearate.
There you go. You see, so if you look at all these, this is formulated like a moisturizer. How big is that container?
Let's see. It is 110 grams, 4 ounces.
4 ounces. Okay. So, and how much does that cost? Do you know?
I don't know. I'll have to check that. Maybe I can put the price
Well,
up on the screen.
multiply it by 4, and that's what you pay per pound. So, again, these are moisturizers that are tagged as anti-wrinkle, anti-aging, but primarily formulated like a moisturizer.
So another one here has, this is really, I was surprised by this one, rapid firming peptide. What is a peptide?
Well, it's another great marketing tool. So peptides in a petri dish they're chains of amino acids, and they communicate with cells to make some physiologic change, and they do that in the petri dish. But remember, those top 20 layers of non-living cells are designed to keep out things like peptides. And so for a charged molecule like a peptide, sometimes they're large, sometimes they're small, but the ability for them to penetrate through those 20 layers, through another 60 layers of viable tissue of epidermis into a lower level of dermis, it's just not doable. So in my opinion, they're great in a petri dish, but when actually used in customary conditions, again, this is a cosmetic, it's a moisturizer.
And that's all it's going to be, is just a moisturizer.
And look and see where the peptide is on that ingredient. I bet that's at the very end too, because they're fairly expensive ingredients.
You know what? This one doesn't seem to have an ingredient list.
Maybe on the box. Sometimes if they're small, they're found on the box.
Okay. And I've noticed some of these products contain a clay, bentonite clay?
Made in Bentonite, Wyoming. It's a common clay from a place. And so that's where it got its name from, I believe.
And what purpose is that? Is that just filling in cracks and little pores? What's it doing?
A clay, or what they call phyllosilicates with aluminum, magnesium. It's been used in skincare for eons. I mean, eons and eons. I have no medical evidence to show it's beneficial when applied on the skin whatsoever. But it's commonly found. Again, if you look in products, it's not one of the first 4 or 5 ingredients.
I keep reading about crepiness, and I get it. I know what they're talking about, crepey skin. Mm-hmm. Is there really anything that can be done about that?
Crepey skin is a result of just the breakdown of skin from getting older, sun exposure, loss of fat. As we get older, we lose subcutaneous fat. Dry skin, so you would moisturize. Again, a raisin turned into a grape. The grape is plumper. It's temporary, but it definitely will enhance the appearance of skin. But to date, there is nothing to treat what you consider crepiness or the wrinkling of skin as we age.
If I am losing collagen, can I take more collagen in through supplementation? And will that make a difference in my skin?
So collagen's a protein, and when you eat it in the stomach, it's broken down by proteases in the stomach into components and into those little amino acids, which are then absorbed. You would be just as well having a piece of steak.
But does it help my skin? Is that ever going to
No,
get to where it
no,
needs?
no. There's no evidence that it helps your skin, unfortunately.
So all of this stuff that we're buying, as your title implies, is just marketing and gimmickry to get us to spend ridiculous amounts of money.
Look, these are great companies making great products, but they want market share and they advocate for shareholders. That's what good companies do. They do try to push the limits when it comes to cosmetic and drug, but unfortunately, to date, um, there has not been an ingredient that can reverse the aging process. We don't even know why we age. There are scientists all over trying to understand why we age. So to say that you can put an ingredient in a product that's a cosmetic, not intended to change the skin or any organ for that matter permanently, um, yeah, it's a lot of marketing, and marketing, Lee, is really powerful.
Yeah, well, it certainly is. I'll give you that. It was so. If I want to care for my skin at any age, moisturizing sounds like it is the key. What are the products you mentioned? Glycerin. There's another one that I often see listed, and I've read that it has some efficacy, and that is ceramides. What are ceramides?
Right. So those 20 layers on the top that are those cells that are not living, they are functional. And they're functional because each of those cells is wrapped in a fat. And the fats, half of the fats are ceramides, which is a natural component of the skin. Again, whether you put them on the surface of skin, I think we talked about this last time, whether it's really beneficial, whether it really gets incorporated into the skin is questionable. But it is a great marketing, the ceramides. And if you look on those ingredients as well, they're going to be listed at the very end because those are also expensive ingredients. So, again, it's going to satisfy the claim. It is true. They are components of the skin, as is hyaluronic acid. But again, that's marketing helpfulness. Whether it really benefits the effectiveness of the moisturizer, I'm not convinced.
Do you use a moisturizer? How do you care for your skin?
Look, if the skin is dry, and you'll know it's dry because you'll see flakes and scales, skin is optimal when it has adequate hydration. Remember, the skin is an organ, right? It's the barrier to the outside world. It protects you from bacteria and fungus and mold and ultraviolet light and allergens. And it functions best when it's healthy, when it's hydrated. So if the skin is dry, applying a moisturizer is a really great idea. So when my skin is dry, I live in New York. When the skin is dry in the wintertime, I will moisturize. And I will moisturize twice a day. I almost never moisturize in July. Its humidity around here could hit almost 100%. There's no reason for me to moisturize. But again, if you have dry skin, to optimize skin function and skin appearance, I absolutely recommend moisturizing.
Your website contains, and I'll put that in the show notes and also make that available on our website.
Mm-hmm.
But your website has an interesting product selector. Tell me how that works and what it's going to do for me.
So the impetus behind the website was I just have patients who don't know what to pick. Some of them have conditions like acne and eczema. It's when you stand at that wall of skincare products at the drugstore and you don't know what to do. Remember, these are blind items, meaning the consumer doesn't understand the ingredient listing. I understand the ingredient listing. And to take a step further is we bought a machine in the office decades ago called the corneometer. And Lee, we actually measure which products work. So by applying a product on a forearm and a different product on the other forearm, we give patients a week to do this. They come back and then we remeasure the water content of the skin. We have a sense of what products are effective. So I took all this information and we put it on a website called Fryface that you mentioned, Fryface. It gave the consumer a place to go to select safe, effective, available, and very affordable products, moisturizers, sunscreens, cleansers, before they go to the store, or they can, again, get it from Amazon if they desire, right from the site.
And I'm just going to give you a second here to hit what I know is your hot button topic, and that is wear sunscreens year round.
Yes, sunscreen, in my opinion, moisturizer are important if its skin is dry, but there is more and more evidence. And remember, sunscreens are regulated as drugs in this country. These are not cosmetics. These are drugs that claim to prevent skin cancer, a disease. And by doing so, it's a drug. And there's more and more evidence that shows not only does sunscreen prevent sun damage, prevent skin cancer, it optimizes the appearance of skin. And that's ultimately what everybody's trying to do. So my suggestion is put on that sunscreen 365 days a year.
And you can do that as, I mean, it comes in moisturizers, right? So you can do two at once.
You can, although I always say use a separate one only because most moisturizers that have sunscreen in them are not usually water resistant and people don't
Oh,
apply them over and over during the day. So I think using a water resistant broad spectrum sunscreen of 30 or higher is optimal. If you can't get yourself to do it, certainly using a moisturizer that has a sunscreen filter in it is absolutely second best choice.
Fane Fry is a dermatologist and the author of the book called The Skincare Hoax. It's an interesting read and one that I recommend for many people. Fane, I appreciate you being here.
Leah, it's always my pleasure to have a conversation with you about skincare.